9.5, Working with Formulas. Today we're going to talk about working with formulas, and a formula describes a known relationship among quantities. A formula is called a literal equation because it contains more than one variable. When we have an equation that contains more than one variable, we can't solve it as it is. We can't figure out what the variables represent unless we only have one variable. So if we were going to solve a formula, we would need to be given what the variables stand for, or what all the variables except for one stand for in order to solve for a specified variable. We use formulas in lots of different applications. It's used in geometry, it's used in science, it's used in things like finance. There's lots of different real-world applications for using formulas. The first type of formulas that we're going to talk about are formulas that are used in shapes. A perimeter means the distance around a polygon, and to find the perimeter of any polygon, you just add up all the sides. We can shorten that if we have a rectangle instead of saying side 1 plus side 2 plus side 3 plus side 4. We know in a rectangle we have 2 lengths and 2 widths. So the perimeter is just 2 times the length plus 2 times the width. In a square, all of the sides would be the same length, so we would just multiply 4 times s. In a triangle and a trapezoid, a lot of times the sides are different lengths, so we would just add up all the sides. In a circle, circumference is the perimeter, but we don't call it perimeter. We call it a circumference. And the formulas for finding the circumference of a circle are 2 pi r or pi times d. R stands for the radius and d stands for the diameter. We know that the radius is half of the diameter, so in order to get these two to be equal, we have to multiply r times 2, and then that would be the same thing as d. So really these two equations are the same. It just depends on what you're given as to which one you would use. If you're given the radius, you would have to multiply it times 2 and then pi to get the circumference. But if you're given the diameter, you just have to multiply it times pi. Whenever we are talking about perimeter, the unit that we use would just be the unit. For example, our unit could be feet, inches, meters, and so on. It's just that unit by itself. For area, area is the amount of space in a two-dimensional object. For example, if you were going to find the area of a room or the floor, then you would multiply the length times the width. It's not the distance around. You wouldn't measure the baseboards around the room. It would be the length of the room times the width of the room to find the area of your floor. And the same thing for your wall. For a square, it's the area side times side, or side squared. For a triangle, it's 1/2 the base times the height. And there are other area formulas. You don't need to memorize these. You just need to be familiar enough with these to know what the variables represent. A, of course, is area. L would be for the length. W is the side. In a triangle, B stands for the base, H stands for the height, and the same thing with a parallelogram and a trapezoid. For the circle, again, R stands for the radius. Now, perimeter was measured in just the units. For area, it's always going to be the unit squared. So, for example, it would be feet squared, or inches squared, or meters squared. Or you could say square feet, square inches, square meters. Volume is the measure of the space inside a three-dimensional region, like a fish tank or a can. So volume would be like what your object would hold. The volume of a rectangular solid would be length times width times height. For a cube, it's the cube squared, the side squared. A sphere is like a ball, and it's 4/3 pi r cubed. A cylinder, a cylinder would be like a can, and that's pi r squared times the height. A cone is 1/3 pi r squared times the height. If you'll notice, a sphere, a cylinder, and a cone all have a circular shape in them. A sphere, would just be a three-dimensional ball. A cylinder would be, like I said, like a can, but its top and its bottom are circular. And then a cone would be something like this. And so all of these that have circles in the shape, if you'll notice, they all have pi in the formula. Again, you don't need to memorize these, you just need to know how to use them if they're given to you. Now, volume is measured in cubic units. So instead of just the unit for perimeter or the unit squared for area, this is the unit cubed. So feet cubed, inches cubed, meters cubed, and so on. Or cubic feet, cubic inches, or cubic meters. Use the correct formula to find the answer for each. Find the length of the rectangle if the perimeter is 24 inches and the width is 10 inches. Use P is equal to 2L plus 2W. So like I said, you don't need to know the formulas, but if they give you the formulas, you need to know how to use them. So, and another thing, we can't solve it unless they've given us everything except for one variable. Well, it says to find the length, so they're not going to give us the length, but they have to give us everything else. The other two variables are W and P. Well, what do you think P stands for? The perimeter. And it says that the perimeter is 24 inches. So I'm going to fill in this formula with what they've given me. If P is 24, that's what I'm going to write. 24 equals 2 times L, which is the length. And we don't know the length, so it's going to stay in L. Plus 2 times W, which is the width, and the width is 10 inches, so 2 times 10. Now that I only have one variable, I can solve this formula for L. Alright, so I have 24 equals 2L plus 2 times 10, which is 20. I'm going to subtract 20 from both sides, and that gives me 4 equals 2L. Divide by 2, so L equals 2. Alright, so that would be the length, and the length is 2 inches, because we're talking about the perimeter. Find the rate if you traveled a distance of 210 miles in 3 hours. Use D equals RT. Well, they told me to find the rate, so we can assume that R stands for rate. If you traveled a distance of 210 miles, so D would be the distance. And then it says in 3 hours, so what do you think T stands for? The time. The time is 3 hours. So I'm going to plug in what they've given me. D is 210 is equal to R is the rate. We don't know R, but the time is 3. And it doesn't matter what order we write these in because we're multiplying. So I'm just going to write it as 3T. Then to solve for T, I'm going to divide by 3. And that gives me 70 is equal to T. And so we were finding the rate. T is 70 miles, because we're talking about miles in an hour, so miles per hour. All right. For number 3, find the height of the trapezoid if the area is 60 square feet, the top base is 3 feet, and the bottom base is 7 feet. Use A is equal to 1/2 H times B plus B. So if you don't remember what a trapezoid looks like, it looks something like this. And the bases would be, like this would be the top base and the bottom base, and of course they're different, so that's why we have 2 different kinds of B's. The height would be the distance from the top to the bottom. And we're looking for, well, this is the area formula. All right, they've given us the area. They said the area is 60 square feet. All right, so the area is 60 is equal to 1/2. We're looking for the height. Find the height. So h, and then we have b plus, capital B plus lowercase b. So it says the top base is 3 feet, the bottom base is 7 feet. Since we're adding, it doesn't matter which order we put those in. All right, so that's 60 is equal to 1/2 h times 10. All right, again, it doesn't matter what order we multiply in. So 1/2 times h times 10 is the same thing as 1/2 times 10 times h, because we can multiply in any order. So if I take half of 10, or if I multiply 10 times 1/2, I would get 5. And then to solve, I would divide by 5. And that gives me 12 for the height. Now, each separate little piece in this is just the length of these different parts. So the area is square feet, but the height would just be 12 feet. So my height is not squared. My height is just 12 feet. But the area, when I multiply them together, is feet squared. Find the length of the radius of a circle if the circumference is 88 feet. They've given us C, the circumference is equal to 2 pi r, and they're telling us to use 22/7 for pi. There's two different representations that are sometimes used for pi, or approximations that are used for pi. 22/7 is the fraction approximation, and 3.14 is the decimal approximation. Where they're telling us to use 22/7 for pi because it's going to work out better in this formula. Okay, so they said that the circumference is 88 feet, so that's what I'm going to put in the place of C. Is equal to 2, and they said instead of pi, I'm going to put in 22/7. And then we're looking for r. Okay. So if I multiply 22/7 times 2, I get 44/7 r. Well, if you'll remember the way that we solve this, if I have a fraction that's being multiplied times a number, I can't multiply a fraction by a fraction. I have to multiply by its reciprocal. So the reciprocal of 44/7, let me spread this apart just a little bit so that I can have room to put this in here. All right, 44/7. So I'm going to multiply by the reciprocal, which is 7/44. And whatever I do to one side, I do to the other side. 7/44. Okay, so these cancel, and then for the 7/44, when I multiply it times 88, 44 will go into 88 2 times. So all that's left is 7 times 2, which is 14. So that's why they were saying that if I use that, it'll work out better than having to multiply out 3.14. So this would be the radius is 14 feet. Now, when we're dealing with formulas, like I said, we can't solve the formula, or we can't figure out what a variable represents, like r is 14, if we have more than one variable. But we can solve a formula for a specified variable. Excuse me. What that means is I can get a variable by itself. So this says solve each formula for the specified, or for the specific variable, and number 1 has a formula, and it says to solve for b. So that means they want me to get b by itself on one side of the equation, and we can do that. So to get b by itself, we're just going to do what we've been doing in the linear equations. However the other things are attached to it, we're going to undo it by doing the opposite. Well, A is being added to B, so to move A to the other side, we're going to subtract A. Now, the only thing different about this is I can't combine it with what I moved it over to. I can't subtract A from P, so I just have to write P minus A. All right, there's still a C there, so I need to subtract the C. And just like with the A, I can't combine it, so I just have to write what I have. P minus A minus C equals B. And that's what they wanted me to do. They wanted me to solve it for B, or they wanted me to get B by itself. So now that B is by itself, I'm done. This is my answer. And if I had written it as P minus C minus A, or negative A plus P minus C, any combination, as long as the correct sign is in front of each variable, then it is the same answer. For number 2, I have I is equal to PRT, and they want us to solve for R. Well, R is connected to P and T by multiplication. So to undo that, I'm going to divide. I want to get rid of the P and the T, so I'm going to divide both sides by P and T. So the P and T cancel, and I'm left with I over PT equals R, and that's my answer. For number 3, they want us to solve for Y. So to get Y by itself, remember, it's like I'm unwrapping a present, so whatever's farthest away, I'm going to start with that first. So I'm going to start with the 3x, and to move the 3x to the other side of the equation, I would need to subtract. And that gives me 2y equals, I'm not subtracting it from the y, I need to subtract it from the 6. Let me see, let me erase that. Okay, so that would give, I'm still doing the wrong thing. Minus 3x from both sides. Okay, so I can't subtract the 3 from the 6 because they're not like terms, so I would write out 6 minus 3x. Then to get the y by itself, I divide both sides by 2. Alright, and this would be my answer. Y is equal to 6 minus 3x over 2. If you wanted to simplify this more, you could, you can't just divide the 6 by the 2. You'd have to divide both of them by 2. So you could write it out as y is equal to 6 over 2 minus 3x over 2. And then that would reduce to 3 minus 3x over 2. But I would just stop here. As long as you have whatever they want you to get by itself, then you can stop. For number 4, I want to get the b by itself. Now I can either take care of the 1/2 or the h first. It doesn't matter which one. I'm going to do the h. Okay, so to get rid of the h, I'm going to divide by h, since b is being multiplied by h. And that leaves me with a over h equals 1/2 b. So just like we did earlier, if I have a fraction times a variable, to get rid of it, I multiply by the reciprocal, which would be 2 or 2 over 1. Alright, so this cancels, and I'm left with 2a over h equals b. Number 5, we're going to get x by itself. Remember, we start with what's farthest away, so that would be the b. I'm going to subtract b from both sides. That gives me y minus b equals mx. To get the x by itself, I divide both sides by m. And I'm done. Y minus b over m equals x. to get the r by itself, and d equals rt. The r and the t are being multiplied, so I'm going to divide by t, and I'm done. D over t equals r. And then for the last one, I have m equals L divided by P. I want to get L by itself, so I got to get rid of the P. L is being divided by P, so I'm going to multiply both sides times P. Alright, so these would cancel, and I'm left with PM, or you could write MP equals L. And that's it.